Waycross presents an election forum for state representative for the 28th District. There are 2 candidates running for 1 open position. The candidates are, in alphabetical order, Jessica E. Miranda, Chris Monzel.
Welcome to another Waycross election forum. This forum is for state representative of the 28th District. I'm Dana Gagnon, Government Programming Coordinator at Waycross Community Media, and tonight in our studio we have 2 candidates, Chris Monzel and Jessica Miranda. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate your being here. Now we're going to start with a 2-minute opening statement, but before we do that, I want to let anyone know who's watching us live on September 28th that you can participate in this program by sending me your own questions. You can email them to live@waycross.org and I will get them here in the studio on this magical device, and I will be able to ask the candidates your questions for you. Now there are a couple rules for those questions. You must be a resident of the 28th District to ask a question. Questions must be phrased for both candidates, not one candidate in particular. When you send in your email, please include your name, street address, and town. I will not read all of that on the air, just your first name and community. But we want to make sure the questions really are coming from the 28th District. And with all of that said, let's get started with opening statements. And Chris, we're going to start with you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Dana, for hosting this, and Waycross Media for giving us this opportunity to talk about our campaigns and talk about the issues that are so important. You know, they say every year, this election is the most important. And to me, I think every election is important, that we need not take it for granted. We need people to be involved. So having this program is really important and gives us an opportunity to talk about ourselves. I've had the blessings to grow up in District 28. I went to school here. I work here. I've raised my family here. District 28 has just given me so much in being involved in the community that I just want to be able to give back to make sure that for future generations, they have all the opportunities that I did. And I think with my experience as an engineer for 30 years solving problems, my experience being a Cincinnati City Councilman for almost 10 years, and my experience as a Hamilton County Commissioner for 8 years, that I can bring that problem-solving skills and that local government experience to the State House in order to address the issues that are so important to citizens today. And just before I came here, I actually was going door to door in Deer Park, and I'm hearing the issues that people are concerned about. And that's basically, inflation, the economy, and just the grocery prices are going up, the utility prices going up, their gas prices are going up, their 401ks are going down. They are just really feeling the misery and the chaos that has been happening in this country, and it's being directed from the administration in D.C. And so I want to fix that. I want to go to Columbus and be able to solve that issue to make sure that we can improve our community here in District 28. And I appreciate the opportunity to discuss more issues with you tonight. Thank you for having us.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And Jessica, now for you.
Thank you, Dana, and I just want to echo those comments. Thank you so much to you, to the entire crew here at Waycross Media for having us. It's always a delight to be here and talk about the issues that are the most important, which are all of the issues here in the Great 28 and the entire state. So thank you so much. I am State Representative Jessica Miranda, proudly serving the 28th House District, or as I like to call it, the Great 28. We are currently 13 of the northern suburbs here in Hamilton County, getting ready to go down to 12 of the northern suburbs of Hamilton County on account of redistricting, and I have been honored and privileged to be serving you and your family for the last 3 years and 9 months almost. So I am just proud to serve you, and we have been able to accomplish so many things, even in a very unbalanced partisanship-wise in the State House, issue that we're dealing with, but I am fighting every single day for you and your family for better, high-quality paying jobs, quality education, no matter what education you choose, and a very safe community. So very proud to serve, proud to be here to talk about more of the issues tonight, and am asking for your support with your vote for re-election this November 8th.
Okay, thank you for those opening statements. And now that we've done that, I'm going to remind you that if you're watching live on September 28th, that means you are able to email me your questions, along with some that I already have emailed here, and you can be part of this program. I will get your questions here in the studio, and I'll be able to ask them for you. let's get started with some questions. Some of these, kind of an introductory question here, and some of this was in your opening statement. We're going to start with you, Jessica, and we'll have 2 minutes. Can you tell us what's unique about your skills and experience that you want to bring to Ohio?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. So first of all, I'm a mom of 3 beautiful daughters. I think that brings a plethora of experience and definitely multitasking skills to the seat of state representative, which you must have serving in Columbus. I am a small business owner, so I can talk about bottom lines, and I can certainly talk about economics in the district and what that means to families who are also fellow small business owners. And I'm also a former school board president for one of our school districts here in the Great 28. And furthermore, a school district that is designated an urban school district in a suburban setting. So that brings, you know, a huge skill set, especially when we're talking about public school funding here in the state of Ohio, which is of utmost importance to me for this re-election race and going into next term in our next General Assembly. I want to continue to serve you and your family in the State House because we have to make certain that the fair school funding plan that we passed in the budget this year has to remain fully funded and actually be fully funded and fully implemented here in Ohio. Because not only do our children deserve a quality education, no matter their zip code, our property owners deserve a tax break. And that is just one of the many things that I will continue fighting for you and your family, and the several different skill sets that I bring to the table and to the State House.
Okay, great. And now, Chris, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Sure. Well, I think there's 3 distinct talents that I bring to this State House. One, which is my experience as an engineer. For 30 years, I've been an engineer where every day we go in and solve problems and try to figure out some of the toughest things. I've been an engineer at GE Aviation, where we are working every day to try to invent the future of flight, lift people up, and bring them home safely. So for me, just having that skill set of problem solving is really key, especially when you see all the problems that we're facing in our country today. The second one is volunteering. My wife and I actually spent 2 full years volunteering. We spent a year living in New York City at a boys' home in Queens, New York, and actually working at a foster care facility in Brooklyn, New York. It was just a great experience. The next volunteer assignment we had was actually out in Oakland, California, at a homeless shelter, Catholic worker shelter, for people who are dying with AIDS. It was a great experience just to understand what was happening with the population and that issue. And then we had an opportunity to go overseas, actually, into Minsk, Belarus, where we worked with an organization called Children of Chernobyl. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant accident had taken place, and the wind was blowing north that day, and unfortunately all the radiation from the nuclear power plant was actually dumped on Belarus. So you had an increase in cancers and leukemia within the children. So we were trying to help that organization get health care, get vitamins, get opportunities to pursue medical treatment in the United States and Canada. Coming back from that, we had an opportunity to really get involved in public service, and that's my third talent, is being involved in local government as a Cincinnati City Councilman, as a county commissioner, especially a county commissioner that was here during the Great Recession of 2008 to 2010. I came in and was able to right-size county government, reducing it by a third in order to keep our taxes and fees low for our citizens. And that's what we're going to be facing here in the state of Ohio, given the economic situation that we're seeing today. And so I think those skill sets will be very critical at the State House in order to help every family, every small business, every citizen in District 28.
Excellent. Thank you for those answers. And we have our first email. Our first email is from Jay in Sycamore Township. Thanks for watching us, Jay. And here's his question. We're going to start this one with Chris, and we'll do 2 minutes again. Upon being elected to this office in 2023, what bill or resolution would you introduce to get voted on that you are passionate about and you would like to see get voted into state law?
So for me, I'm very passionate about protecting our local governments. Being in Hamilton County Commissioner and being on Cincinnati City Councilman, to me, making sure that there is protection there in regards to their authority and making sure that they can have local control and making sure that they can make the decisions that are necessary. To me, that's one area that I really want to focus on and work on, and just ensuring that the state doesn't overstep the bounds of local government. To me, my political philosophy has always been the government that's closest to the people is the best, as the one that knows what's going on and are informed. So to me, to work on a bill that will help local governments keep that, especially I've heard from several local governments here about the state trying to come in and take over the income tax and make it standardized so that all the receipts are going up to the state. To me, they want to be able to control that process and make sure that it, is locally here and not something that can go to the state and then thus run into issues. To me, that's something that I'd like to work on. And then secondly is working at just our budget and trying to go in and really cut waste and inefficiency in the state government. Because to me, that's what we did in Hamilton County back in 2010 when we were coming out of the recession. We're in a recession right now. We're going to need that same skill set up in Columbus to be able to go in there and be laser focused on what needs to be cut from a waste and efficiency standpoint, because we can't afford it. We can't afford to be raising taxes. We can't be, afford any more increased fees and red tape. We need to make sure we reduce that regulation, and I'd love to focus on that and work in a way to eliminate our state income tax. And to me, that would be a great goal, of being able to go in there and reduce our spending so that we can be competitive by not having a state income tax in Ohio. So those are just two things that I'd love to work on when I get in there on January of 2023.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, same question for you, Jessica.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you, Jay, for the question. I would say one of the utmost important bills to me, because it is personal to me, is House Bill 266, of which I've introduced this General Assembly. This bill is to repeal the statute of limitations laws for victims of child sexual abuse and rape. Believe it or not, here in Ohio, we do have a statute of limitations law, which means after you turn 18, if you are a survivor of childhood sexual abuse or rape, your clock starts ticking and it runs out 12 years after you turn 18. That is unacceptable here in the state of Ohio. Those are archaic laws that should not be in our code, and we should be putting the utmost protections on our children and survivors of some of the most heinous sexual crimes in this state, and not making the law work instead for pedophiles, rapists, and criminals. So that is something very personal to me, and I will say, aside from that, of course, balancing the budget is something that we always do. In the State House, I've had the privilege now of working on 2 budgets in the 2 General Assemblies I have served. Both budgets have been good budgets. There's always things that are, things I'd like to see improved. And one I spoke of a little bit earlier is fair school funding. We need to ensure fair school funding is fully funded because, like I said, taxpayers deserve a break, and our children deserve quality education no matter their zip code. So those are obviously high priorities. There's a plethora of other things I would love to do and pass, but we have somewhat of an imbalance in the State House right now in terms of partisan makeup. So a lot of things that you would like to do can't be done because the supermajority, prevents common sense things from getting done. So those are some of the high priorities, and then of course, always making sure the local government fund gets restored back to where it was 13 years ago before Governor Kasich slashed it, is where we want to be and where we know our local governments need that support.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Jay, for sending in your question. And we have some more questions for you, too, that have also been emailed in. So let's just jump to those. And I believe we're going to start with Jessica this time. 2 minutes again. This is a short question from Sarah on Kenwood Road. And her question is, do you support Ohio's 6-week abortion ban?
Thank you for that question, Sarah. Again, as I've already highlighted, as a survivor myself of child sexual abuse and rape at the age of 15, I do not, absolutely do not, and unequivocally do not support Ohio's 6-week abortion ban. It is very, very dangerous for women and girls and all pregnant people across our state. We have seen how that has hurt, literally, already a 10-year-old girl who had to flee state lines to get the kind of medical procedure that she needed to save her own life so that she didn't have to carry her rapist child at the age of 10. So I fully support reproductive freedom in this state. I do not believe big government has any say or should have any say whatsoever in what happens in your own private health care. Also, I don't believe they have any say in what happens in your own private bedroom. That is a place where the reach of big government needs to stay out of it, and they need to let women make their own decisions about their health care and their reproductive freedom. This is why I've introduced House Joint Resolution 5 in the State House this year. When we saw the Dobbs decision coming down the line and knew what that was going to turn into with an extreme Supreme Court, we immediately got to work to pass, not to pass, but to introduce reduce that so that hopefully we as Ohioans can do what the state of Kansas has just recently done and pass our own Reproductive Health Care Act here in Ohio, because every single poll that has been done shows that the majority of Ohioans, not just the majority of women, the majority of Ohioans support access to free reproductive health care, and that should not be government's decision.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. And I have the same question for you, Chris.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for the question. I do support the heartbeat bill. I believe in protecting life. And to me, life begins at the moment of conception. And from that standpoint, we need to defend life. And with that, though, I think you have to look at what do we need to create here in a society to promote life. And that's looking at prenatal care. That's looking at affordable child care. It's looking at making sure that child support payments are being made. That's making sure that we have in place adoption opportunities for couples that want to adopt that can't have a child. We need to make sure that we work on those issues so that we can promote a culture of life. And with that, one of the things I worked on the Hamilton County Commission was on infant mortality, of working with, bipartisanly with former Commissioner Todd Portune. We worked together to create Cradle Cincinnati, which provided health care and prenatal care for mothers so that they, when their baby was born, could be able to make sure that it could live through its first year to reduce our infant mortality rate. Hamilton County had one of the worst infant mortality rates. In fact, the state of Ohio has one of the worst infant mortality rates in the country. And I feel that program is such an important program, we need to take that across the state in order to offer that. Because if we are truly going to promote a culture of life, we need to make sure that we have those services in place for the child to be successful, and that's from prenatal, child care, child support, and adoption services. And that's what I'll be working on when I get to Columbus.
Okay, great. Thank you for those answers. And thank you, Sarah, for sending me your email. I appreciate you being part of this program. We have another email. This email is from Kathy in Montgomery, and this time, Chris, we start with you.
Okay.
And we'll do 2 minutes again. And Kathy wants to know if you support gun legislation, what kinds of gun legislation that you support, and we'll start.
So I feel, and I always believe this, that in order to have the First Amendment, you got to have the Second Amendment. That you need to make sure that you have a balance there of what is, in our society that we're seeing right now, very violent crime occurring, and trying to make sure that we get guns out of those people's hands who are causing that crime. But balancing that with law-abiding citizens that deserve to have their gun, deserve to be able to protect themselves. So how do you weigh that balance? And I point to some cities already that have really extreme gun control laws of New York City and Chicago, and it's not working. It's not working there. You're still seeing murders. You're still seeing a high rate of gun violence. And to me, that isn't an answer. We need to come up with something that's going to be holistic, that's really going to look at that and try to focus on what is the problem. Why do we have such a violent culture? Why do we have so much happening? And it could be guns, it could be cars, it could be, we have a pedestrian issue in the city of Cincinnati where pedestrians are being hit by cars consistently. Why is this happening in our society? And I think that's what we really have to focus on. And that's working in the schools and trying to go in and teach conflict resolution skills, making sure that they have mental health services in place so that there is not turning to violence as the answer, because that time and time again is happening. So for me, I think we need to promote those type of ideas and programs, because just banning guns isn't going to solve the problem. It just isn't. It hasn't. It hasn't worked, and it won't work here until we really address the true issue, and that's coming to the core of the problem of what is happening with our culture and why we're being so violent, and trying to address that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. And now I have the same question for you.
Thank you, and thank you, Kathy, for the question. First, I want to make very, very clear that I did not support House Bill 99, which is putting more guns in our classrooms. I did not support Senate Bill 215, which is getting rid of background checks and permitless conceal carry. I used to be a concealed carry permit holder myself. There is no reason why we should have gotten rid of our concealed carry permit holder program. It was working just fine, and it's yet another way to defund local governments, because now that is another stream of revenue that is not going to be funneling into our sheriff's departments all across the entire state. And for a little bit of numbers, some data behind the facts is there was over 2,400, I believe, concealed carry permit holder applications that were denied in the most recent year that that program was in effect, before the supermajority of Republicans got rid of concealed carry, that were rejected for various reasons because of the background check you have to run to get a concealed carry permit. Now, all of those people that were previously rejected for not to have a gun and weren't, deemed fit to have a gun or a concealed carry permit will now have easy access to guns and be right out on our street once again. So the kinds of extremist bills that we see churning through the State House are not what is right for our community. In fact, it incites more violence in our community because Ohio is now a murder first, ask questions later state as well, and I did not support that bill either. What I have done in the State House is start the first ever gun violence prevention caucus so that we can start to change the conversation of what needs to be done in our community, talking to parents, talking to educators, talking to veterans in our community on what works best and how we turn gun violence around, because it's not about gun control, it's about gun safety. And the extremist bills that have been passed in Columbus is not gun safety at all.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for those answers. And thank you, Kathy, for being part of our program. If you are watching this program live on September 28th, you can also send me your question right here in the studio, and I can ask the question to the candidates for you. You can just email that to live@waycross.org, but only if you're watching it live on September 28th. Let's get to some more questions now. Let's see, I think we are going to start with Jessica now. And what I'd like to know is, how can the state assist struggling school districts?
Well, first and foremost, we could fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan. So we introduced House Bill 110, which was the state biennium budget, and that was passed, and I supported the Fair School Funding Plan formula that was implemented into the state budget. However, next to General Assembly, it is time to fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan, because if it's not fully funded from the state, there can be no relief down here at home on property owners through our property taxes. And also, I just really, truly believe more investment in education is always a good thing. It's never a bad thing to give more money in the state budget to education, because that is our future generation, and that is what matters the most in our communities. Like I said earlier before a couple times, it should not depend on what your zip code is in terms of the access you have to a quality education where you live in your neighborhood. So the best way to do that is to fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan, and then of course continually fund and make sure it's going to be sustainable the wraparound dollars in which the governor has allocated to our school districts. That is something that I supported the governor doing, wraparound services and the millions of dollars that we allocated. However, we want things to be sustainable. We don't want to give, this one bucket of money to schools and say, there you go, that's it, figure out what to do from here. It needs to be sustainable, and it needs to be continual dollars, because our children in lots of different places are dealing with a lot of additional issues and different socioeconomic statuses, and some children in some areas need more assistance and need more wraparound services than others, and that's something that we have to realize, understand, and implement full good policy around it.
Okay.
Thank you, Dana.
Great, thank you for that answer. And now I have the same question for you, Chris.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Dana. And I think, I do congratulate Speaker Cupp for the bill to come in to start fully funding, finally, after, 20-some years of being unconstitutional in the state of Ohio of school funding. Is a great first step of what we need to do. We are blessed here in District 28 with so many great public schools, and just the resources to make sure that they continue to be that way is key, and it's critical. So for me, I think that's really important. I think another aspect of it is, this is something I got when I was going door to door in Sharonville. I met an elementary school teacher from Sharonville Elementary who was like, I just want to be able to teach. I just want to be able to go in there and not have all these regulations and all these things that came in. She gave an example of, she had a child that increased the reading from basically 20% to 45%, doubled it. But she still was receiving a failing grade because it wasn't at the 50% level. And to her, it was just demotivating of being able not to show success of having a child move forward, but rather it was showing that they didn't do good enough. So for me, I think there's a lot of reform that we need to do in regards to these, just deregulating some of that red tape that's coming into our schools. And I want to work with the local school districts to find out those ways to do it. I think another avenue to look at is, coming up with making sure that parents are involved in their school and making sure that they know what's going on. I think for me, when you look at COVID and just how horrible it was, one of the bright spots was that actually parents got to see what was going on in their schools because the kids were at home and they were seeing it. Unfortunately, because they were at home and they weren't in school, we fell behind a year, which was a negative aspect of it. But I think having parents involved is critical, and they should have transparency of understanding what is the curriculum being taught in the classroom and making sure that parents are involved with that. To me, I think that helps, increase the viability of our schools and making sure that they're successful within District 28.
Okay, great. Thank you for those answers. And let's change topics a little bit. Let's go to another direction. One thing I'd like to ask is what you think, by the way, we're starting with Chris this time, what you think the state should do, if anything, to support public transportation and possibly rail improvements.
So since I get to go first, to me, I believe, I've not been a big rail supporter. When I was on Cincinnati City Council, they tried to put the streetcar in while I was there. I was saying, let's look at the numbers, let's look at the data, let's see if it's really even viable to be put in. And unfortunately, it wasn't when we ran the numbers. And to me, you really have to look at the full system and the effects of it. Just to build it and say, people will come is not the way to look at transportation policy. We really have to look at multiple different phases of it. Rapid bus transit is one that is definitely something that should be utilized and looked at. Just building a rail system, to me, is honestly a big boondoggle and could really tank the state in regards to resources and finances that should be going into other areas. I think we should be really kind of forward thinking of what transportation is going to be down the road. We have the Ubers and the Lyfts and what the involvement of that. Once, again, I was involved in Hamilton County Commission, I was saying shouldn't sort of be looking at those type of models of what is being happening with Uber and Lyft and being able to utilize that for our seniors or for folks that are able to get to the bus stop to make sure that they can make the last mile. Those type of ideas, I think, are critical and really being future thinking on how we want to set up a transportation system. I think just building rail is costly, expensive, and just isn't going to fit the job that I believe the future of Ohio will need.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I have the same question for you, Jessica.
Thank you, Dana. First and foremost, I just want to highlight my yes vote on the budget in 2019. So my very first year in the State House, we passed a monumental public transportation funding package within the state biennium budget. That has, proved to have tremendous results in all of our urban areas, but not just the urban areas, and the suburban areas as well. I also very much so support the light speed rail, proposal that we have on the table that I'm sure you all have seen floating around on social media and in other areas. In fact, the city of Sharonville, that is in the Great 28, has already passed a resolution in support of that light speed rail project as well, and I suspect more of my local governments will do the same. The point of the matter is we have, in just 2021 alone, I have been able to work with our local economic development engines and create 3,330 new or retained good-paying jobs here in the Great 28, and people have to be able to get to those jobs. So good paying jobs is one part of the accomplishment. The second part is getting people to those jobs. And the only way folks can get to those jobs is a robust public transportation system that is funded by not only the state government, but the county government, which we have also had big accomplishments in doing the 3 years and 9 months I've been in office in Columbus. So those are things that I look forward to doing. And then one last thing, if I have time, that I'll get in is if we have that light speed rail that can get from Cincinnati to Columbus in mere minutes, imagine how much more civic engagement we could have with our students, with our community members, when they can get to their seat of government, the State House, much quicker than an hour and 40-minute drive from here to there. And that, of course, is something that I would always support and would always love to see, because the State House is where everything happens. Those are all of the rooms where everything happens, and everyone should want to know what's going on.
Okay, great. Thank you both for those answers. The next question starts with you, Jessica, just so you're ready for it. And let's piggyback that a little bit. We talked about getting people to those jobs. So How can the state encourage business growth in Ohio? And we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the state of Ohio does a really good job of doing this already. We have a economic development engine that was created, which is Jobs Ohio. Jobs Ohio does a really great job working with our local economic partners. And here in Hamilton County, we have the benefit of having Ready Cincinnati, who I've worked with to not only retain, but to create new jobs here in the Great 28. And the way that you do that with all of these partners is you keep businesses in your district and you give businesses incentives to come to the district. And we have seen, monumental job creation that's getting ready to happen up in the Columbus area with Intel coming to the state. We have had project after project after project here in the Great 28 of businesses expanding, creating new jobs, businesses coming to the district, and new jobs and retaining jobs is what it's all about. And that is exactly how we create robust communities, is having successful businesses in our communities that create those good paying jobs so that folks can have access to those careers, those paychecks, those benefits, and be able to stay in our community and live a good quality life. They can live here in Ohio, retire here in Ohio, and send all of their kids to school here in Ohio, because here in the Great 28 we have the best of everything. So that hopefully answers your question, but let me know if I missed anything.
I think that was thorough. Thank you so much. I have the same question for you, Chris.
So I think it comes down to, in order to have a business environment that is friendly, especially when we're competing against other states, is looking at our tax policy, looking at the red tape that's in place that's difficult for businesses to get going. To me, that's what we have to focus on. And I did that when I was on Cincinnati City Council. I also did it as county commissioner, where we actually created a red tape cutter that came in and looked at our county services to say, how can we reduce the amount of red tape so businesses weren't waiting practically months in order to get permits in order to do any development. To me, that is the type of ideas that we need at the state to say, how can we streamline processes so businesses can get in here and be able to get developed quickly so that we're not waiting and wasting time and effort on red tape. So to me, that is one area that we need to focus on. Taxes is the other one, as I brought up earlier. I'd love to work on a proposal to eliminate the state income tax. I think having that will be very attractive for folks to come here to live and work and raise their family and to retire, because it will be competitive. To me, I think those are what we need from a policy standpoint to focus on in Columbus in the next session and going forward. Keep our taxes low, keep our red tape cut in order to make sure that our businesses are thriving and successful.
Okay, great. Thank you for those answers. I'm going to piggyback that on that a little bit, and we start with you, Chris, this time. When we talk about all of these workers coming in, I have been getting questions from young professionals who would like to stay in this Cincinnati Grade 28 area, but they can't find affordable housing to match those starting salaries. So what can the state do to make housing more accessible for them? We'll start with you.
Yeah, this is a very important issue that we need to focus on and try to address. And unfortunately, it's a byproduct of the inflation that we're seeing that's being driven by the policies of the administration in D.C. with President Biden. When you see prices going up, it's not just your grocery bill, but it's also your rent. It's also your mortgage. And now, with mortgage interest rates going up, it's even more difficult for folks to be able to buy a home. So there's a lot within that process of dealing with the inflation that we're seeing in the country that's being driven by D.C. from the state to deal with. So first, we need to make sure that we have the supply to meet the demand. And that's working with groups, and I had an opportunity when I was on city council as well as county commissioner to work with Model Group, which was an organization that was looking to go in and develop affordable housing throughout the communities and trying to come up with ways to provide incentives for that through tax breaks. And I believe right now there's an opportunity at the state to come up with a housing fund of $500 million, $50 million for 10 years to go help certain organizations like Model Group to develop that housing in the various communities across the state. Because therefore, then you have a demand that's going to beat the supply. As right now we don't. And especially with the inflationary rates that we're seeing the rents going up, people aren't going to be able to afford, those apartments that we do have. So we have to be able to have other apartments available to them. And by doing these policies and making sure that they have that investment, we're going to be able to get that housing for those individuals.
Okay, Great, thank you for that answer. And I have the same question for you, Jessica.
Thank you, Dana. And first, I just want to point out that before my time in the State House, I had the honor and privilege of serving on the City of Forest Park's Economic Development Commission, and we were lucky to pass a lot of different areas here in the City of Forest Park as community reinvestment areas. That is one of the many first steps local governments have to getting better and more housing developed in their cities and in their villages. We have a lot of that going on around the Great 28, and that is definitely a good place to start. I would say another place where we could do a lot of good in this area is bringing back the first-time home buyer tax credit here in Ohio. We have done a little bit of work on this in the State House. It hasn't gone as far as I'd like to see it go, and we can definitely afford as a state to invest more into those programs so that young professionals can move out to the great suburbs like those in the Great 28 and start their family here, put down roots, and send their children to school and hopefully retire here. Another thing that I would just like to point out too, in order for our young professionals to want to stay here in Ohio, we have to be instituting and implementing the right types of policies here in the state of Ohio. And unfortunately, what has happened in the State House with this rise of extremism, we are turning young professionals away. Young folks are leaving our state in lines. There isn't a day that goes by where I hear someone that could have stayed here in Hamilton County and chose not to in Ohio because of all of the crazy policies that are coming out of Columbus. And that is what you can count on me for, not only to make sure that we're bringing sense to Columbus, but fighting back against those policies that cause people to leave Ohio rather than stay here in Ohio. And then really quickly, we have a little over $1 billion left of federal money that could be going back into the Community Action Agency here in Hamilton County to continue to help people with their rental and mortgage assistance as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you both for those answers. Let's follow that up with a question about, related to that, related to the housing. Some of our local communities are finding that their supply of rental homes and first home level homes are dwindling when out-of-state companies buy them and they use them for short-term rentals or for distant rentals. Is there something at the state level you can do to help make those available for the local residents? And this time we start with Jessica.
Absolutely. So there is currently a bill in the State House that aims to, make stronger the presence that those short-term rentals and out-of-state landlords have in our communities. I know all of my local governments are against that, and I am against that bill as well. I think it is dangerous when we are introducing way too many short-term rentals or these Airbnb situations into our communities. Not only is it, a place where it could get out of hand in terms of whatever type of event is going on in that house in that specific weekend and cause a lot of issues for our public safety and first responders. But it is definitely something that, is not good for a community and for our housing supply, if you want to speak about it in terms of supply and demand, like you said. So I think where we need to start and what we need to continue doing is investing in first-time home buyer pilot programs and actual implemented programs that can allow that dream to become a reality for people and young professionals, and then also continue to do what we've done here and successfully in the City of Forest Park with our community reinvestment areas, and have new home developments as well that can, create that kind of supply we're looking for families looking to move out into our suburban communities here in the Great 28.
Okay, great. And I have the same question for you, Chris.
Okay. So I'm aware of a bill that State Senator Bill Blessing has put forward whereby it would create a 45-day window that any LLC that's outside the state of Ohio could not come in and purchase a property. That 45-day window could actually be used by local community groups, local governments, local nonprofits, that they could go purchase the property first before it would be potentially bought by an out-of-state LLC where, they're not here, there's, no skin in the game of what they're actually seeing in the community, and therefore, they can raise rents, raise prices, control it in a way that really could damage communities. So I'm supportive of that idea, of that concept of being able to give local communities, local governments, local nonprofits, that window to be able, and you know, maybe we could get it to be 60 days or 90 days, you know, just enough time for them to work on to be able to get the resources to take over those properties and be able to control them locally and not by some out-of-state LLC. Because when I was on Cincinnati City Council, we saw that time and time again of just rental apartments or rental properties that are being, you know, owned by groups that were outside not only the state, but actually outside the country, and trying to deal with them in regards to how they manage their properties and just the blight that they contributed to the community. So being able to have something in there that at least gives local control of local, you know, governments and local nonprofits an opportunity to get a hold of those properties first is a great idea, and I would be supportive of that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for those answers. And we do have another email, so I'm going to go to that next. Judy in Sharonville has sent in a question that says, how can the state support its universities? And we start with you, Chris.
So that's a really good question. I have definitely skin in the game. Three children, all of which went to state universities. My daughter is a graduate of Ohio University and also University of Cincinnati Law School. And I have two Buckeyes right now. My two sons are a senior and a freshman up at Ohio State. So I've seen this firsthand of the importance of our university system here in Ohio. And also just how lack of funding and support that local students get. When we were, my youngest son, he's a freshman, we were up there for orientation. It was amazing to see how many out-of-state students that were coming in. You know, when they asked where you were from, it was a tremendous amount. And it's because they make more money off it, because they're paying the out-of-state tuition. So for me, I think there's got to be some balance there that kind of gives for our local students an opportunity to attend, because right now it's tough to get in Ohio State. And to me, that's a state school, and people should have an opportunity to go there, especially if they have a perfect score on an SAT or ACT. We want that, you know, student to come to our state schools and not go out of state, or, you know, the brain drain that could occur that way. And so to me, I think we really need to focus on policies in regards to making sure universities are really putting Ohio students first before any out-of-state students, because it's a state school. That's what it's there for, is to make sure that our citizens have an opportunity to get that education.
Okay, great, thank you. And now, same question for you.
Thank you, Dana. Well, I think the way I think the question read is, how can the state better invest or support our colleges
yes.
and universities? So first and foremost, we have to do a better job investing in them in the budget, right? There has been a couple different years now where the funds have decreased for what we were sending to our universities and colleges, and it has to be increased. You know, in order for children to choose the path of life that they want to go down, and in this case, if it's college or a university, they need a affordable option, right? There has been a lot of talk of, you know, student loans and the forgiveness of student loans that are happening. Funding the OCOG program here in Ohio is one thing, but we need to make sure we are fully funding the universities to what the state can do and manage for students, because that's going to matter for Ohio students. It's going to matter for our young professionals staying here in Ohio, and it's going to matter in our state budget. And so we need to make sure that we are investing in Ohio universities to the tune of what we've seen in the past but haven't quite seen recently. And it's much more than just funding OCOG and that program. So that would be my answer to that question. And I would also just add, you know, we put Ohio students first all of the time, and I hope that once my children get to college age, they're not quite there yet, but once they get there, they have an abundance of great Ohio universities that they have to choose from right here in our state.
Okay, great, thank you. And thank you for your email on that question. If you are watching us live on September 28th, you have maybe a little bit of time left. Don't hold on to it. If you are waiting to email your question, send it in now, because we're getting closer to the end. And if you do that, I will be able to ask your question. I'll get your email right here in the studio. I want to change topics again, as I have been doing all evening. And now I'm going to start with you, Jessica. The question is, Ohio is dealing with an opioid epidemic. Are there tools the state can offer local governments to help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think here in Hamilton County, we are blessed because we have such a good county program that has been responsive to the opioid epidemic, thanks to our commissioners in Hamilton County. This is, clearly an issue that's not going away anytime soon, and the state should do and should be doing everything in our power to make this better for families. There are communities across our state that are hurting more than others, but the reality is this is not a problem that our families caused or people caused, period. This is something that was caused by Big Pharma, and injecting these pain pills into all of our communities, and now we have seen it turn into this very heinous opioid epidemic. The problem with what we should be doing versus what we are doing in the state right now in terms of the opioid epidemic is we aren't doing enough. Right? And that is because of the imbalance we have of the partisan makeup in the State House. We are too worried about the curriculum that is being taught or not taught in our classrooms for our students. We're more worried about the big arm of government coming into your personal bedrooms and telling you how to live your life and what to do with your reproductive freedom. And we're more worried about, children's genital checks, internal and external. Believe it or not, that's a thing that was passed by the extremist supermajority in June before we left on summer recess. So if anyone ever questions the sex of your child playing sports, there could be an internal or an external exam to prove the sex of that child playing sports, which is outrageous, I know, but believe it, because this is the kind of policy that's happening in the State House. And this is why we're spending too much time on all of this nonsense instead of spending the time on things that matter, like saving families and people from the opioid epidemic in all of our counties, all of our 88 counties across the state.
Great, thank you for that answer. And I have the same question for you, Chris.
Yeah. No, it's a very serious issue, and honestly, you can point directly to our open borders that we've been dealing with, specifically from the Biden administration, and the lack of border control and the amount of drugs that are being carried across and into our communities here in Ohio. We've seen an uptick now of fentanyl overdoses, and when I was on county commission, we actually created the heroin coalition to be able to go after and make sure that we have the resources in place of, one, going after the drug dealers, making sure that we're getting them behind bars, and then two, also working with the community to make sure that they can have the services to be able to get off addiction. Quick response teams was what we initiated within a few communities that were highly successful, and they're still going forward today. I would love to take that model and be able to apply it for the rest of the state, because I think that's something the state could do is take best practices from Hamilton County to be able to go into those other areas of the state that are struggling with this and say, how do we create this similar type of hero coalition? How do we create these quick response teams where they're going in and actually going to doors and talking to folks to say, hey, we want to save your life because we know you're on a pass. And this is actually when they've overdosed, of being able to go to them and say, this is an opportunity to save your life. We can help you do that. To me, that is what we need to put in a state level to go in and help our communities that are facing a scourge. And honestly, the open borders has just exacerbated even more with the policies that we're seeing from President Biden in Washington, D.C. We don't control the borders. We're not controlling the flow of those drugs. And that's something that needs to be done immediately.
Okay, thank you so much for those answers. I'm going to follow up on a theme I've heard throughout the evening. But it's also something we see at every level, and Chris, you're first on this next question. We see at the federal level, in Columbus, and even among voters, a very partisan split lately. If you are in Columbus for this next session, how can you work with both your colleagues from both parties, but also how could you reach out to voters from both parties? Because you'll have both of those in your district. I'm going to start with you. We'll do just 1 minute on this.
Oh, okay. So I've been going door to door and meeting Democrats, meeting Republicans, meeting independents. To me, because we represent as public servants everyone in the community, every single person. And so for me, that's why it's important to go out into the community and meet them and be able to understand what they're feeling. And from a standpoint of working bipartisanly, I have done that time and time again. When I was on Cincinnati City Council, I was in the minority the full time I was there, but I was able to get legislation through. Also in the county commission, I started out in the majority, but then my last few years I was in the minority and worked bipartisanly with Commissioner Portune, Commissioner Driehaus on several issues, like the Heroin Coalition, like Cradle Cincinnati, like moving our Board of Elections to a central location in the county to make sure that was easier for folks to be able to go vote. To me, those are the type of issues that I'm willing to work with across the aisle. And it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. I will represent you in Columbus to make sure that your voice is heard.
Okay, great. I have the same question for you, Jessica.
Thank you, Dana. I am very, very proud to represent the Great 28, and almost every single bill that I have worked on is a bipartisan bill, bipartisan piece of legislation. Some issues I cannot get my colleagues on the other side to join me on, but most everything that I work on is bipartisan, including the 2 bills that we just passed this year, one of which is strongly supporting our school counselors and making sure they have the work divvied up that they need to do for indirect versus direct services to our students, especially in their biggest times of need, because that's what our school counselors are for in our buildings, and that was a bipartisan bill that we passed. We also passed the Testing Your Faith Act, which was a bipartisan bill to ensure that all religions, no matter which student identifies with whatever belief, that they get the same kind of accommodations in higher education here in the state of Ohio. That is something that I am committing to continually do. That is something that I know I have to do in this district and in the State House. That is the reality of what the State House is. And absolutely, of course, no matter what partisan affiliation the person is in the Great 28, I will represent you and your family to the best of my ability, and it is an honor and a privilege to do so.
Well, thank you so much for those answers. I really appreciate both of you being here tonight and being so accessible. You see, we've had a lot of emails coming through, and we're near the end, believe it or not. There are a whole lot more topics that I wish we could delve into, and really I wish we had more time for longer answers even. But before we end, let's make sure you each get a chance to do a 2-minute closing statement. Now this time we will start with you, Jessica.
Thank you, Dana. And again, just thank you and the entire crew here at Waycross. We appreciate you putting on these forums. This is, for the voters, for the constituents to see the choice that they have before them. And we've said it here tonight, every election is important, but by golly, this midterm election is so important this year on November 8th. Choice is on the ballot this year. Common sense is on the ballot this year. Being accountable to the public and being in the neighborhoods that I represent each and every single day is on the ballot this year. And I am just so proud that I have had the opportunity, the honor, and the privilege to serve you and your family for the last 3 years and 9 months. And I'm asking you to vote for me, to re-elect me, to send me back to the State House, to be a voice of reason for you and your family, and a very, very hard and strong fighter for what we know is right for all of us women, all of our children, and what we know is right for public safety in our communities. I am proud to be endorsed by so many different organizations this year, which shows the breadth of my voting record and the diversity I have to represent your family well. And if you want to check all of those out, you can go to jessicaforohio.com. That's jessicaforohio.com to check out all of those. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, firefighters, teachers, doctors, nurses, the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, and so many more. So please check out my website for more information. Follow me on social media. Go to ohiohouse.gov, click on my name, sign up for my monthly newsletters so you can stay up to date with what's happening here in the Great 28. And I'm asking for your vote this November 8th for re-election so I can continue fighting for you in Columbus.
Great. And now, Chris, same for you.
Well, thank you, Dana and Waycross Media. We really appreciate this opportunity to speak tonight about the issues that are important to all citizens in our district. Going door to door and talking to so many folks over the last months, it's been really interesting to hear what is important, what's really people are feeling. And they're feeling pain. They're feeling just a lot of uncertainty in regards to how they're going to even afford their grocery bills, or how they're going to afford heat this winter, or how they're going to afford what they're going to do with their retirement. To me, hearing those stories and seeing that just points to the failed policies that we've had in America over the last 2 years, and that we need to come in with people who are going to work to address those issues at the state level, at the federal level, because if not, we're just going to be in a world of hurt even more. It's going to be chaos and misery through and through, and we have to be able to work together to move our country in the right direction. And to me, I bring a skill set. I'm a father, I'm an engineer, solve problems for a living. I've had public service being a volunteer, being involved in my local government as a city councilman, as a county commissioner, I bring a skill set that can go to Columbus and actually get things done and actually solve the problems that we're working on today, as I did it. I did it back in 2010 during the Great Recession at the county. We were able to right-size county government, making it 30% less and making it more efficient, more lean, and being able to keep taxes low and cut red tape to make sure that we had more money in people's pockets. That's what we need to do in Columbus, is to have that laser focus to address the issues that people are talking about every day, that they are feeling it. And we need to make sure that we have people that have common sense solutions going to Columbus to get those done. And I will do that and represent everyone in District 28. More information about me, you can look on my website. That's monzel.com, monzel.com. And I ask for your vote this November, but October 12th is actually when you can start voting. We have voting month here in Hamilton County, not election day, and that starts on October 12th. And I appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Great. Well, I want to thank both of you for coming in today, and I want to thank you for watching at home as well. If you need more information before you vote in the upcoming election, you can watch all of our election forum programs online at www.waycross.tv. You can also go to the Hamilton County Board of Elections website to make sure you are registered, to see a sample ballot, and to find out where your voting location is. That's votehamiltoncountyohio.gov. Registration to vote for this election ends October 11th. Early voting, as mentioned, begins October 12th. I'm Dana Gagnon, Waycross Government Programming Coordinator, and I will see you at the polls on November 8th.
Waycross takes no position on candidates or issues. We conduct these forums so that our viewers may be better informed voters for the November 8th elections.